Good morning, dear friends, and thank you very much to IDB for the invitation to appear. It's a perfect segue to the last presentation. You might wonder what it is that we're talking about if we're talking about prisons and violence and the response to this type of insecurity in a discussion on economic development. The basic proposition here is that these are closely linked, that a country must, if it is serious about issues of social inclusion and if it's serious about issues of economic development, must embrace wholeheartedly the challenge of providing security, reducing violence, and thinking about its prisons. I'm going to talk to you mostly about prisons today. I'm the president of John Jay College. We're doing wonderful work throughout Latin America with support from IDB, eager to work with you if you're teased and intrigued by this presentation. So here we go. So we have to think about social inclusion as including those people who are most at risk and the most disadvantaged. And in every society, those are often people who have been involved in crime or involved in the justice system. So why do we think about incarceration rates? These are teasers for you to come up to me after the break and talk about your country. We want to talk about incarceration rates as being important national variables that matter when you think about the well-being of a society, and to think about reentry, the process of leaving prison, and think about that as a challenge to those who care about social inclusion and well-being of a society. There's enormous differences across Latin America and the Caribbean in terms of rates of incarceration. Here's a challenge for you. Do you know your country's rate of incarceration? Something we talk about a lot in the US because ours is very high. Here are some exemplary sort of illustrative rates here on the screen. You can talk to me about more of them. Two types of rates. One is those in prison. Pretrial detention is a uniquely acute problem in Latin America, something that every society, we would argue, should pay attention to. Look at the slide, see if you see your country. But there's also growth in incarceration rates across the region, unlike the rest of the world. What's going on in Latin America? An important question for those of us who think about punishment, criminal justice, and security in our societal responses to crime. A quick sideways glance into the US. I just chaired a panel of our National Academy of Sciences on trying to understand why we have such high incarceration rates in our country. They're off the charts. We lead the world, not something that we're proud of. We are very clear that these high incarceration rates are not because of crime, they're because of policy choices. These are within the domain of our legislative and executive branches of government, and if we make different policy choices, we will have different incarceration rates. We're also very clear that the consequences are very damaging, long-term for families, communities, economic well-being, and particularly hard-pressed communities. So how do we think about reentry, this process of people coming out of prison? This is something where we can all come together and improve outcomes for people coming out of prison, to improve their economic well-being, to improve social inclusion, and to stop the marginalization of individuals who have been incarcerated. So economic development is a direct consequence of these policy choices. What we know from research by economists, labor market economists here in the US, is that the mere experience of having been in prison decreases your lifetime earnings by 10 to 30%. So if you have a lot of people, mostly men of color, mostly men who live at the margins, who have been in prison, you are by your policy choices decreasing their economic well-being, and if that's concentrated in certain communities, which it is, you're basically depressing the GDP of that community. So that's the link. That's the elevator talk. So we want to keep these links forefront in our mind as we think about economic development and social inclusion. So there are these big questions for every country, which is what can all of us do as elected officials or as academics in our case, or business leaders or banks. The IDB is at the forefront of thinking about these issues within the global banking business, and I tip my hat to them for that. But these are important policy choices that every society has to take on frontally and explicitly. We're trying to do it in the States. It's hard right now. It's hard in any country because we demonize those people who have violated the law. And we don't take them as our fellow citizens who need to be thought of as candidates for social inclusion. Thank you very much.